My wife's diary betrayed her affair with my brother. The kitchen clock's relentless ticking pierced the silence, each second a hammer against David's unraveling world. It was past 2 in the morning, the Maplewood house cloaked in darkness except for the dim glow of a single bulb above the oak table. David sat motionless, his fingers tracing the rim of an untouched whiskey glass, its amber liquid catching the light like a frozen flame. Across from him lay Sarah's diary, its soft blue leather cover scuffed at the edges, a deceptively ordinary object that had just shattered 12 years of marriage. The words he'd read inside, in her familiar looping handwriting, burned in his mind. Michael's arms felt like home today, by the lake. I'm drowning in guilt, but I can't stop. Michael, his younger brother. The betrayal wasn't just a wound, it was a chasm swallowing trust, love, and the life they'd built together. Maplewood was the kind of town where life moved slowly, where neighbors knew your name and the streets smelled of fresh-cut grass in summer. David and Sarah's colonial home, with its ivy-clad brick and wide front porch, stood as a monument to their shared dreams. They'd moved here after Lily was born, drawn to the quiet streets and good schools, trading city bustle for a life of barbecues and bike rides. Sarah, with her sunlit green eyes and laugh that could thaw any frost, had been David's anchor since they met at a friend's backyard party 13 years ago. She'd handed him a lemonade, her sundress swaying in the breeze, and he'd known, even then, she was his future. They married young, built David's architecture firm from scratch, and filled their home with memories. Lily's first steps in the living room, Sarah's rose garden blooming in the backyard, late-night talks over wine about plans for a second child. Michael was the wild card in their story, 2 years younger than David, with a charm that lit up rooms. Tall, with a quick grin and eyes that seemed to hold a secret, he'd always been the one who could talk his way out of trouble. Growing up, the brothers were close. David the steady one, Michael the dreamer. They'd shared summers fishing at their parents' cabin, swapped secrets under starlit skies, and stood by each other through life's storms. Michael was David's best man, his wedding toast a heartfelt ode to Sarah's light and David's loyalty, bringing tears to the guests' eyes. He was Uncle Mikey to Lily, tossing her into the air with a laugh, her giggles echoing through family gatherings. To David, Michael was family, unbreakable, until now. The diary's discovery was an accident born of restlessness. Sarah was away for the weekend, supposedly visiting her sister in Boston, a trip she'd taken more often lately. Lily, 7 and full of energy, was at a friend's sleepover, leaving the house too quiet for David's liking. He'd wandered into the living room, its shelves cluttered with books, photos, and Sarah's gardening magazines, and started tidying. The diary slipped from behind a stack of seed catalogs, its spine catching the lamplight. David hesitated, his thumb brushing the cover. Sarah was an open book, her joys, fears, and dreams spilled freely in their late-night talks. Why a diary? What couldn't she share? Guilt gnawed at him, but curiosity won. He opened it, expecting musings about her garden or Lily's school plays. Instead, he found a confession that stopped his heart. The entries began months ago, small at first. Michael stopped by the community center today. His smile made me blush. They grew bolder, more intimate. We walked by the lake and he held my hand. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. The latest, dated 2 weeks ago, was a dagger. Michael kissed me under the willows and it felt like waking up. David so steady, so safe. Sometimes I need fire. David read and reread, each word a fresh cut. The lake was their lake, where he and Sarah had picnicked with Lily, where Michael had taught her to skip stones. The community center was where Sarah volunteered, organizing fundraisers, where Michael had started helping out last year. The signs were there. Sarah's late nights, Michael's vague excuses for missed calls, the way their glances lingered at Thanksgiving. David had seen, but not seen, blinded by trust. He didn't sleep. The whiskey sat untouched, its scent sharp in the air. Dawn found him in the backyard, staring at Sarah's rose garden, its blooms vivid against the gray morning. She'd spent years tending it, coaxing life from soil with a patience David admired. They'd sit here at dusk, wine glasses clinking, planning Lily's future, or dreaming of a trip to Italy. Now the garden felt like a lie, every petal hiding a secret. He clutched the diary, its weight heavier than the gold band on his finger. Anger surged. How could she? How could Michael? But beneath it was grief, a hollow ache for the life he thought they had. David's mind replayed their marriage, searching for cracks. His long hours at the firm, chasing promotions to secure their future, had left Sarah alone more than he'd meant. She'd never complained, always greeting him with a smile. But had he missed her fading? Michael, unattached and restless, had moved back to Maplewood after a failed startup, crashing on their couch until he found a place. His charm had filled the house, his jokes easing Sarah's quiet moments. David had been grateful, thinking his brother's presence lightened her load. Instead, it had kindled something forbidden. Lily was the hardest part. David pictured her brown curls, her gap-toothed grin as she ran to Michael, shouting, "Uncle Mikey!" She adored him, her hero who built her a treehouse and snuck her extra cookies. How could David tell her the man she loved had betrayed them? How could Sarah and Michael be so selfish, risking her world for their stolen moments? The diary mentioned no plans to leave, no talk of love, only guilt and desire. But that didn't soften the blow. They'd chosen each other, even if just for moments, over him. When Sarah returned that evening, her suitcase thumping in the hall, David was ready. The diary lay open on the kitchen table, its pages a silent accusation. She froze, her coat slipping from her shoulders, her eyes locking on the book. "David," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "How did you—" He cut her off, his voice low, trembling with rage and pain. "Michael, Sarah, my brother, how could you?" Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't deny it. She sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice muffled. "I was lonely, David. You were always working, and Michael, he saw me. I know it's wrong. I hate myself for it." Her words were a plea, but they couldn't bridge the chasm. She spoke of feeling invisible, of Michael's attention awakening a part of her she'd buried. "It wasn't love," she insisted. "It was a mistake. I love you, David. I love our family." But love felt like a hollow word now. He asked about the lake, the diner, the car, each detail from the diary a fresh wound. She answered, her voice breaking, confirming every moment. "It's over," she said. "I ended it weeks ago. I couldn't keep hurting you." But the diary's last entry was too recent, her guilt too fresh. David didn't believe her. Not yet. He called Michael that night, his brother's voice bright, until David said, "I read her diary." The line went silent, a void that spoke louder than words. "Dave," Michael finally said, his voice small. "I'm so sorry. It wasn't planned. It happened." David's grip tightened on the phone. "You're my brother," he said, his voice cracking. "How could you do this to me? To Lily?" Michael had no answer, only apologies that rang empty. "I'll stay away," he said. "Whatever you need." But what David needed was the past undone, the diary unwritten. The confrontation with Michael came days later at their parents' cabin by the lake. The water lapped against the shore, its surface calm despite the storm inside David. Michael stood by the dock, his hands in his pockets, no trace of his usual swagger. "I messed up, Dave," he said, his eyes avoiding David's. "I love her, but I love you more. You're my brother." The words stung. Love, not just desire. David's fists clenched, the urge to strike overwhelming, but he saw the boy Michael had been, the one who'd followed him through childhood, who'd cried at their father's funeral. "You broke us," David said, his voice raw. "You broke everything." Michael nodded, tears falling, and walked away, his figure shrinking against the horizon. Sarah begged to stay, to try therapy, to rebuild for Lily's sake. David agreed, not out of love, but for their daughter, who still danced through the house, oblivious to the fracture. He moved to the guest room, the space cold and unfamiliar, a mirror of his heart. Lily sensed the tension, asking, "Why's Daddy sad?" David forced smiles, spinning stories about work stress, hating the lie. Sarah stopped volunteering at the community center, her evenings spent in the garden, pruning roses with a feverish focus. Michael left Maplewood, taking a job in Denver, his absence a quiet promise to give David space. The brothers' bond, once a lifeline, was now a ghost. Weeks turned to months and therapy began, a slow, painful unraveling of their marriage. David spoke of his anger, Sarah of her loneliness, both grappling with guilt and shame. He learned she'd felt unseen, her identity as wife and mother swallowing her dreams of painting, a passion she'd abandoned. Michael had noticed, coaxing her to sketch again, his praise igniting more than art. David saw his own failures, his absence, his assumption that love was enough without effort, but forgiveness was a distant shore, the diary's words a constant tide pulling him back. One autumn evening, David sat in the backyard, the air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves. Lily was upstairs, her laughter drifting through an open window as she read to her stuffed animals. The rose garden glowed under the moonlight, its blooms defiant despite the coming frost. Sarah joined him, tentative, a mug of tea in her hands. "I'm still here," she said softly. "I'll keep trying, David. For us. For Lily." He looked at her, seeing the woman he'd loved, the one who'd betrayed him, and felt a flicker of something, not trust, but possibility. He thought of Lily's smile, of the home they'd built, of the roots that might still hold beneath the cracked earth. The diary rested in a drawer now, unopened but not forgotten. David didn't know if he could fully forgive or if love could bloom again like Sarah's roses. But he chose to stay, to tend the fragile hope that had taken root in the wreckage. The betrayal had shattered him, but in the quiet of Maplewood, under a sky heavy with stars, he began to believe that broken things could grow again, not the same, but stronger, shaped by truth and time.